YouTube, Kennard Vernon Stewart here once again for the podcast for Auburn Sports Talk Football here on Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn, where it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger. I want to welcome all the Auburn fans and visitors from the SEC who like to get a scoop on Auburn football. On this channel, it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Talking a little defense today for the Auburn Tigers. Man, we are looking at the possibility of Auburn perhaps having the best, or if not one of the most elite defensive lines coming back into this season. This is actually our defensive line. Is Auburn's defensive line going to be the number one defensive line in the country? This is part 3, actually, of a series that we have going on, talking about the defensive line and the many components thereof. This whole thing started shortly after the Music City Bowl against Purdue, when Derrick Brown announced that he would be returning as an Auburn Tiger. Well, a lot of people are like, hey, what's the big deal? Well, you have to have been sleeping under a rock if you don't understand the potential impact of Derrick Brown's return on a lot of levels. You look at the level of leadership, you look at the level of experience, and you look at the level of athleticism. If you saw him in the spring game, where indeed he was the defensive player of the game, you can see that Derrick Brown has kind of chiseled up a little bit. I'm not too sure if he's actually lost weight, but he definitely looks more agile than he has been in the past. And then portions of that spring game, he just literally took over the defense, and his defensive teammates followed suit. Very, very good spring game for Derrick Brown. Very good start to what could be arguably one of the better defensive lines in recent history for the Auburn Tigers. Some more reasons to get excited. Marlon Davidson decides to return. And, of course, you got elite athletes like Nick Cole, Big Cat Bryant, T.D. Moultrie, Coinus Miller. A lot of those guys are coming back to be contributors to what should be a very, very good defensive line and could spell into a very, very elite defense. Now, one thing we can't discount is the coaching staff that's going to be helping to lead the charge in this regard. We can't mention this without mentioning Rodney Garner, who is the associate head coach and the defensive line coach for the Auburn Tigers. Now, he's been around for a while. He's a former Auburn standout. From back in the day. He played during the Pat Dye era. Now, when you look at Garner's coaching career, just like so many coaches between Auburn and Georgia, you look at the fact that a lot of coaches who graduated from the respective schools have actually had success at the rival school. You look at Vince Dooley from back in the day. For Georgia, led Georgia to their only national championship, was actually an Auburn graduate. You think about Pat Dye. We actually talked about this in another video before. Pat Dye, who has a portion of the field named after him, was a Georgia graduate, had his most success at Auburn. You look at Rodney Garner, for example, had a great career playing-wise at Auburn. Most of his success and his longest tenure as a football coach has come from the University of Georgia, where he helped those guys to numerous SEC championships, also coached a lot of great players along the way. So nothing should be different coming into this particular season. I think Coach Rodney Garner has done an excellent job of setting the tone and setting the standards, and has done a great job of being able to consistently recruit year in and year out elite defensive linemen. One of the main position defensive-wise that has been a mainstay over the past few years is the defensive line position. My goodness, just think about how much different the Clemson game would have gone, how much different certain portions of the Alabama and Georgia game would have gone had it not been for the elite defensive lines. You talk about since 2016 and the arrival of Kevin Steele, the Auburn defense has averaged given up less than 20 points per game. Even in 2018, where I think the defense took somewhat of a step back, Auburn still finished the season only giving up 19 points per game. But the only issue with Auburn I had last year was statistically weren't too good down the stretch. And we've talked about this before. 488 yards per game, allowing 28 points per game. Also, they just had a hard time getting teams off the field with giving up 20 to 22 first downs per game. And those are the types of things that can get you in a lot of trouble when you talk about, defense in the SEC. Now, Auburn has to be very excited about what's returning at the defensive line position. And like I said before, this is really going to be key. This is one of my favorite matchups to think about as Auburn approaches the Advocare Classic. Oregon will be a lot more physical than they have been in the past, definitely more physical than they were back in 2010. And I think up front is where you're going to see, just like in any Power 5 football game, the line of scrimmage dictates how the game goes. Because if you listen to the announcer, they will say one or the other team is controlling the line of scrimmage. And the team that usually controls the line of scrimmage usually has the best outcome. And it's gonna probably look like a stalemate in some cases when you talk about Oregon and Auburn. Derek Brown will be a huge force in that interior part of the football field. Tyrone Truesdale is the presumed successor of Dontavius Russell, who's held that spot for so long. But I mean, Auburn is so talented at the defensive line. I mean, you can mix some things around, even to add some diversity and give some offensive coordinators some different looks on video footage. So there's a lot of diversity that can take place as well because of the return of Derek Brown, because of the return of Marlon Davidson and some of the other talent that's coming in. Then you think about, off the recruiting trail, probably my favorite player to watch out of this 2019 class is Charles Moore, who could be an absolute beast at either any position on the defensive line. I mean, he could even get to a position where he could probably play buck. I mean, he's a very versatile athlete. You talk about Kobe Wooten out of Lawrenceville Archer High School, who could play a role as well. So a lot of exciting things for the Auburn Tigers coming up in 2019. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn, part 4 to this defensive line edition of our coverage coming very soon. As always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger on this channel. War Eagle.